Hi there, friends. Welcome back to Global Glory Chasers. I am so excited to be in the studio today and getting to interview one of my dear friends. I have Marie Chan here with me today, and she is going to be sharing a little bit about her new children's book, which was just released. And Marie is just inspired by culture and diversity. She is one of the people that I learned so much from. She is the daughter of Taiwanese immigrants, and this fuels her passion to write children's books that actually amplify underrepresented voices. And so you'll see as we hear a little bit more about this book that she published called Mamie Takes a Stand, that this Asian American history actually comes from some of her own cultural background and wanting to learn more about that as well. She's a former public school teacher, and she also is from California. So I live in Central California. She lives in Southern California, and her book takes place in California as well. So she talks a little bit more about that in the book, and we're going to hear about that. She also is married. She lives with her husband and 2 children, with a third in heaven, and her giant rabbit, Sunshines. Marie, welcome to the podcast. I already know that you are a global glory chaser, and I'm so excited to have you here.
Oh, thank you so much, Dorina. It's such a joy to be here with you.
Well, let's kick it off by talking a little bit about how you and I are connected. I would love if you would share that story. I love how our lives have intertwined through the years.
Yeah, I really feel like it's a full circle moment today to celebrate the launch of my book, Mamie Takes a Stand. But I still remember how you were so pivotal in the start of my writing journey. This was right before the COVID pandemic shut everything down. We had both gone to the first Someday Is Here conference here in Southern California that was led by Vivian Mabuni. And I remember I was very shy. I was like, kind of like not sure what to expect, but I was searching for other Asian American, like Christian women leaders, and I hadn't really seen anything. And I thought, wow, there's this gathering. I need to come. And Dorina, you had your book table there, and I didn't know you, but it had been about almost, not quite, but almost a year since my youngest son had passed away unexpectedly. And you had some things about grief. And I remember we kind of connected over that. But then I also saw that you had Cora Cook's Ponset and your children's book. And I was like, oh, this looks so interesting. I love, multicultural children's literature. And so the thing I regret is I don't think we took a photo, but I just loved meeting you. And then just as a few months went by, actually, after the conference, and I remember subscribing to your Glorygram, and I really enjoyed reading all the things that you wrote and learning from you. And then, I remember my husband saying, why don't you contact that Dorina, that author you met at the Someday Is Here conference about writing children's books? And I'm like, I don't know. That seems really awkward. I mean, there were a lot of people there. I don't think she'll remember me. And then you replied to my email. I think I might have even just, contacted you through your website. I don't even remember exactly. And then you gave me some tips about where to learn more about writing children's books. And then we didn't really see each other communicate for almost a year. And during that time, I had submitted my manuscript for Mamie Takes a Stand to some different editors and different things, and God had just done amazing things, and it was all because of that one email response to your Glorygram. And I said it's a full circle moment, because recently, thank you for letting me share about Mamie Takes a Stand in your Glorygram newsletter, and it's been about 4 years since that whole process started. And thank you so much for being so generous with sharing your expertise. And literally, your one email transformed my life. I never knew that you were going to become my mentor on my writing journey, and just such a good friend.
Well, this story is really special to me because it also shows the power of just one encouraging word. And I'm not taking credit for that, because honestly, I've had so many people on my own journey who have offered a resource or a quick encouraging word that have poured into me. And so in a way, I feel like I'm just passing that on to you. I think it was a quick email. I think it was like just here's some quick resources. But the thing is that you followed up and you actually took those steps to pursue the publishing journey, to learn, because I know you are a learner. And now, as I get to hold this beautiful book in my hands, I feel like I'm an auntie or maybe like a doula for Mamie Takes a Stand. And this book, I think, also exemplifies so much what it is to be a global glory chaser. So we're going to circle back to that in a moment. But let's talk a little bit more about Mamie and where this idea came from, because I know it's unique. And tell us a little bit more about the book itself, the story.
My inspiration came from another children's book called Separate is Never Equal. I was reading that around the same time I met you. My daughter had chosen it from an e-library, and it was about Sylvia Mendez and the Mendez et al. Versus Westminster et al. Case here in Southern California. And that just floored me. I mean, we had gone to this Chinese restaurant that was just a mile away from where the Mendez case took place, literally the same street, and had gone there for like years. And I had never known about this case from 1947, which happened 7 years before Brown versus Board of Education. So that led me on a rabbit trail of research. And that's when I discovered Mamie Tape's story, that the Chinese were also not allowed during the time of the 1882 Chinese Exclusion Act to enter public schools in San Francisco. And so my story is about Mamie Tape, particularly in 1884, when she was 8 years old. She was denied access to this school that was literally like just down the street. I've walked that street before from her house. This story is about how her family fought for her right to go to school all the way up to the California Supreme Court.
Oh, well, I love that you are uncovering for us this story. And this weekend, Marie and I got to be together at a special event in Los Angeles called the LA Kids Book Festival. And one of my privileges of being able to share a booth with you and be at the table with you is I got to hear you share this book with so many families. And I think one of the resounding things that we heard over and over again, and this is true for me too, is like, wow, I've never heard this story before. I didn't know about this piece of history. And especially for us as Asian American women, being able to understand some of that history, but even for people who are from different backgrounds, how important it is to recognize that the withholding of education to kids is not just this black, white binary. It's important for us to understand about Brown versus Board of Education, but also that there were other cases. And that's what you're uncovering with this book. So I wonder if you could also tell a little bit about how you chose the shape of this book, because it is a picture book, but it has more words than maybe the typical picture book. And it's for older kids, maybe who are looking to learn about this history.
Yeah, I really thought it was important to give it shape, like to have a narrative arc, and also include just like literary devices. Like I really was very intentional about putting some alliteration, symbolism, even certain rhyming words and stuff so that it would sound more lyrical. And I wanted it to really have an emotional tug, but it was really hard to do that because I wanted to make sure I had evidence mostly from primary sources for everything that I wrote. So if you look at some of my original manuscripts, like initial manuscripts, I have footnoted like every article that goes with every sentence in the book so that I know like why I wrote that. Yeah, because I really wanted it to be as nonfiction as possible. And then I really like how the Chinese called San Francisco Gold Mountain because the Chinese came here to mine for gold during the gold rush, those first generations. And so I thought, wait, Gold Mountain, I love that imagery, and gold, like let's just go with that. That's very California gold rush. So I just brainstormed. I went back to like when I was in fourth grade learning California history as a student in California, like what were all those gold rush vocabulary words we had, and so you'll see some of those like stake your claim and the concept of weaving that treasure throughout the story. So I was trying to kind of combine those elements together.
I love hearing some of that backstory because I've even read the book and some of those things I noticed and some of those I didn't. And so just your intentionality in that, it also shows that that's a book that we can read more than once because there's a lot of layers here. And tell us a little bit about your background in education. And I know you're even teaching today.
So I am a very visual kinesthetic learner. And so I like to teach that way. I like to do a lot of hands-on learning. So I felt like I was writing a second book when I did the 45-page extensive parent and educator guide. So there I didn't want to just focus on racial discrimination, although that's important, but I thought it was also important to have graphic organizers because I think it's more accessible for students. I also wanted to have children dive in for themselves into primary sources. So there's some primary source material and more historic, like tape family photographs in the guide, and then just fun, like hands-on activity, cooking, recipes, those kinds of things. So I know the actual book has a discussion guide and notes, but wanted to go beyond that. And my background is I have a master's in education, but my main master's project was um, using multicultural children's literature to teach character education and things like that. And so I've always had just a love for diverse books and writing lessons that are very active learning, because I think kids remember that and it's more fun and engaging.
Yeah, you are just brilliant at this. I love how you are so hands-on and offer up so many different ideas. She mentions this bonus educator guide. How can people get a hold of that if they're interested in not just purchasing your book, which we hope people will, and I'm going to put that in the show notes, but how can they get the educator guide?
Yeah, you can just go to my name, which is my website, mariechan.com, and then my book page, which is mariechan.com/books. And there is a place there for you to get the digital download.
Awesome. Well, we hope that people will take advantage of that. In fact, I signed up for it today because I want to get a hold of it too. I think it's really fun to have those added bonuses, and especially for teachers or parents who are listening. And now you are part of a homeschool cohort, is that right? What do you teach now, or how do you approach your education in this season?
Yes, I love differentiating for different learners, and I love bringing culture. Like last year, our co-op, the whole theme was around the world. And so we had a whole culture fair, which was so fun. Gosh, these families brought so many different foods, which was a lot of fun to celebrate. And it wasn't just like kids sharing about their own cultural background, which is great too, but they were welcome to explore and learn other cultures and share that too, which I think it was fun. I taught art from around the world. And so the kids did from all different countries, like different kind of art. And I also brought in some Chinese calligraphy. And so they're in the educator guide for Mamie Takes a Stand. It took me a lot of trust. I actually wrote those Chinese characters of Mamie's name. It has a lot of strokes for kids to try. And so I really like, yeah, just incorporating different art from different world cultures and stories, music, all those different things. A lot of cross-curricular, like integration, interdisciplinary activities. I like to help kids see the connections between the different subject areas instead of seeing it in isolation and then connecting it to literature.
I love the calligraphy activity too. And I had the privilege of being part of a retreat last year where Marie was teaching us and giving us an opportunity to try out Chinese calligraphy. And then this weekend, when we were at the LA Kids Book Festival, you were doing that with the kids as well. So, do you want to share a little bit about Chinese calligraphy? Because I know it's unique with the different characters in the pictures.
It was really hard to research actually the Chinese characters. I wanted to show actually that Chinese as a language has multiple dialects. And for
Mhm.
me, my mother speaks Taiwanese and Hakka, which are other dialects of Chinese. But for Mamie's family, some of their names, and it took a lot of research contacting different professors to decipher accurate transliterations for the pronunciation guide. But uh, it seems like some of the words were from Hoisanghua or Toisanese, and some were from Cantonese, even though they all share the same characters. And so something interesting about Chinese is you say your family name first. And I think that in itself just shows like how as Asians, we have a very collective identity. But yeah, so I wanted to just bring that out that this language, I love how Chinese is pictorial and there's a lot of symbolism. And so my grandfather was a master calligrapher. And so I remember seeing his artwork in his home and just really appreciating that, even though he couldn't directly teach me. But I'm thankful that like this past year, I've gotten a chance to learn from a master calligraphy teacher from Beijing. So another really hard decision I had to make when writing Mamie Takes a Stand is, should I correct Mrs. Tape's letter to the school board? She writes this letter telling them that they've been very unjust in the way they've treated Mamie and not allowing her to go to the public school nearest their home. And her English is not perfect. And I was like, are people going to misunderstand when they read my book, thinking we didn't like grammar or spell check it? But in my mind, I was like, no, I want kids to see this primary source. I want them to see it exactly the way she wrote it and it was printed in a newspaper, because I think it's important for people to know that even if you're an immigrant here and you don't speak perfect English, if you see injustice, your voice matters, your story matters, and you should stand up for what is right and speak out against injustice. The reason why I'm relating this to Chinese calligraphy is I was talking to Darcy from Redbud Writers about this, and she said something insightful that made me realize, for me, my Mandarin isn't perfect. So when I speak and write Mandarin, it's more at an elementary level. And so like with me, I'm like a lifelong learner. I'm still learning the calligraphy. It's not perfect. And I was thinking, now I know how it feels, because it's like the reverse. Like I'm trying to write stuff in Chinese and it's not perfect and it's okay. Just like Mrs. Tate wrote something and was perfect, but it's still powerful. It still resonates with readers today, her words.
That's really powerful. And I think for me, because I got to try doing the calligraphy with you and, we learned about the ink and how to hold the brushes and everything. I also got to have that very visceral hands-on experience. And it does feel like that, like, it's like riding a bike where you just don't know how to do it at first, but you have to start to pedal if you want to learn. And I felt that as I experienced it too. But then I valued so much being able to step into Chinese culture by trying to do that with you. And you also encouraged our group to, you didn't have to be perfect. Like just try it out. I think that is such a valuable lesson for all of us, kids of all ages, I'll say, which includes adults as well. And you really model that in the book. Just for parents who might be wondering, who might be listening, what would you say is kind of the target age for this new book?
This is for middle grade readers primarily, ages 8 through 12. But honestly, I think high school students could use it too, because if you use my parent educator guide, I have even more discussion questions. And Mrs. Tape was also a photographer. And so she has photos that she took in the late 1800s that show cross-cultural integration, which was very different from some of the other photographers at that time period that would take photographs of the Chinese and make it seem like we were exotic or perpetual foreigners. There's actually a professor who I contacted who did this whole part of a chapter of her academic book, just analyzing Mrs. Tape's photographs and has a discussion of this. And so that's where I observed this and thought, hey, this is important for kids to learn too. Like who takes the pictures, whose perspective makes a difference? Is it really accurate, even though it's still taken during the same time period?
Just kind of piggyback on what we've already been talking about. I also want to talk about the spiritual connections here in your book. And I recently invited you to be a guest writer for my Glorygram, which is my weekly newsletter, where you share a little bit about this as well. But as we think about chasing God's glory, which is a phrase I use often in my writing and then here on the podcast, the idea that we're looking for God and his glory in the world. How does that fit in with kind of the message that you have here of Mamie Tape and really of the whole book, Mamie Takes a Stand?
Yeah, so when I was first researching this book, the thing that really stood out to me was Mrs. Tape's letter. In it, she says, "Is it a disgrace to be born a Chinese? Didn't God make us all?" And I was like, whoa. I was really surprised because this family had gone to church, and I think a lot of propaganda um, showed the Chinese to be a little bit different in that time period. But just those words really hit me like, yeah, this is foundational. Why do we show respect to others? It's because each person is made in the image of God. Each person has inherent worth and value. And so I was like, this is an important theme that I really need to bring out. And so I was thinking that was interesting because God, like even in creation, shows that he loves diversity, right? I mean, all these different kinds of trees, flowers, animals. And why can't we appreciate that diversity in other people that God has made? Yeah, I think about how many times I tried to just assimilate into mainstream culture and hide my Asian heritage instead of really trying to glorify God with my full authentic self and not be ashamed of that. And so I think it's important for kids to have this message so that they can celebrate the unique way that God has made them, but also appreciate the unique way God has made others as well. Secondly, I also wanted to include the importance of allyship. There were different pastors and different allies, people of faith that supported the Tate family. And so I think it's also important to show a balanced view that if you're a bystander in the community, like you can be used as God also to help glorify him in loving others, welcoming these immigrant families. Uh, yeah, and not, you know, discriminating against them. So yeah, so those were just some of the themes of connecting faith, culture, and social justice in the book.
I love this idea that part of chasing God's glory, part of understanding or experiencing God's glory is actually that social justice that you're talking about, because God was a God of justice, and we are not called to be the judges, but that we can be part of, like you said, serving folks in the community. And I think about that even in our context in 2024, maybe that's reaching out to a refugee family, or it's in a classroom being accepting of others maybe who don't look like them. Are there other examples that you can think of where that social justice and participation in God's glory comes up in 2024?
I mean, I think it's unfortunate that, there is still, incidents of anti-Asian hate going on even today. And that was the thing that was really hard was when the height of it was during COVID, the things from the late 1800s were almost being repeated in 2020. And so I think it's a message that we still need to learn. And I think also that's why representation matters, because I think there's still only a paucity of Asian American biographies on the bookshelves of school and public libraries. And I think the more we know about hidden figures like Mamie Tape, then we can have more empathy and respect. We can broaden our perspectives and just raise awareness so that we do know how to have these conversations and welcome people and and be aware, be concerned.
Well, friends, that in itself is a reason why you should buy this book. Mamie Takes a Stand is this beautiful book written by Marie, and I think it helps to draw us into that experience. And I think we do continue to have those opportunities each day. Marie, I appreciate your willingness to share not just about the book, but also your personal experience. I'm sorry for just the prejudice that you've experienced yourself. And I'm so grateful that you're willing to put a story like this out because, like you said, it is a message that is important for all of us. I want to end kind of on a fun note because we like to talk about food on our show as well. So, as a final quick question, what is a food that feels like home to you?
So we call it chiffon, but it's that rice porridge. Like I just remember every time, like when you have a stomach ache or something, my mom would make that Chinese rice porridge for me. And somehow it's just very soothing and warm and feels like home.
Oh, I love that. We had a version of that that my grandma, who's Filipino, she used to make for us when we were sick too. And I think it like she just called it like twice boiled rice or something like that, but just so comforting, something that soothes the stomach. I love that you mentioned that. And again, food is that way that we can experience God's glory. So thank you, Marie, for spending some time with me today. I am so excited about your book, Baby, being launched into the world. I hope that our friends listening will look it up. We'll share all of those links in the show notes so that you can easily access some of these things that Marie has been talking about and do some exploring a little bit more on your own. Thanks, Marie, for being here with me today.
Thank you, Dorina.
Hey there, friends. I'm excited to share with you 3 Global Glory Chasers recommendations today. This is a tradition here on our show, and I love to give you tips for food, books, and travel that point us back to God's glory. So I have 3 to share with you. The first is written by my friend Marie Chan. It's a recipe for Chinese chow mein, and I got to see her make this recipe from scratch. It looks delicious. I'm so excited to try this recipe this week for my family. And if you go to mariechan.com/books, and I'll put that link in our show notes, you can download her educator and parent guide, and it includes all kinds of great resources, which we talked about in our interview, including this recipe for the Chinese chow mein. I'm so excited to try it. Recommendation number 2 is a new book called Loving Your Black Neighbor as Yourself. And this was written by my friend Shantae Griffin. Here's a little bit about the book. It says, Jesus calls you to love your neighbor. And in the fight against racial injustice, that call includes your Black neighbor, your Black colleagues, your Black congregants at church, the Black family in your neighborhood. Yet maybe you're unsure of how best to show your love, or maybe you fear either saying or doing the wrong thing. In Loving Your Black Neighbor as Yourself, Shantae Griffin equips you to see and love your Black neighbor with God's deep, holistic love. Using Black love lenses birthed from African American cultural values, you'll learn meaningful ways through which you can see and care for your Black neighbor. This is a book that I'm working my way through. I love Shantae's writing. She is a journalist. She's won awards for her amazing writing, and she is a friend of mine through the Redbud Writers Guild. I highly recommend you check out this book, which is published by Waterbrook and Multnomah. And that is my second recommendation for today. And last but not least, a little tip for travel. One of the things I love to do when I travel to a new city or even to a new country is I check out Yelp. So Yelp is a reviewing site where people put in reviews of local businesses, and I use it specifically for restaurants. So I like to write reviews on Yelp, and I like to read reviews on Yelp. If you are looking for restaurants that are in a certain city, you can search that location. You can search a specific kind of restaurant, like say you wanted Mexican food or you want Italian food. You can check out some of the top rated ones in the area. And I also have built some collections. So some of the cities that I have traveled to, whether it be Portland or Chicago or Fresno, California, where I'm from, you can follow me. Dorina G is the name of my profile on Yelp, and you can check out those collections. And those are some of those tried and tested restaurants that we've been to as a family, ones that I highly recommend. So if you're in a certain city, you can check out if I have a collection, or you can just do a search there on Yelp, and it is an awesome resource for travel. Friends, thank you so much for joining me for those Global Glory Chasers recommendations today. I want to share with you an excerpt from my friend Marie Chan's new book, which she mentioned in our interview. It's called Mamie Takes a Stand, A Chinese American Girl's Fight for School Rights. And this is a beautiful book that is published by 10 Peaks Press out of Eugene, Oregon. I'm going to read for you just the opening to give you a little teaser into what this book actually sounds like and why it would be important for you to read and share with your family. Here's what Marie writes. Mamie Hunter Tape was born in the heart of Gold Mountain and searched for a treasure greater than gold. She found hints of it shining in her mother's handmade porcelain dishes and paintings of shimmering flowers and landscapes. She discovered glimmers of it in numbers and letters when she learned to read. Mamie wanted more. She wanted to go to school with the children in her neighborhood. But in 1884, Chinese children were not allowed to attend San Francisco public schools. So this is a biography that my friend Marie wrote about Mamie Tate, and I love how she invites us into the story using history, interviews that she did with the family, and beautiful metaphors that are all throughout the book. So I highly recommend this one. We will put the link to this in the show notes as well. Friends, thank you so much for joining me today for Season 5, Episode 3 of the Global Glory Chasers podcast, which is made possible and ad-free by generous supporters through my Substack. If you haven't heard of Substack, it's a publishing platform. You can go check it out, and you can sign up for my free weekly Glorygram, which is a newsletter that I include an encouraging story and other recommendations there. You can also choose to become a paid subscriber for only $5 a month or $50 for the year, and you can save a little bit of money that way. But it is one of the ways that you can support me as an author and as a podcaster, and so that I can keep my things mostly ad-free. Details are over at dorinaglorygram.substack.com. And I want you to know we're going to be right back here next Wednesday to drop the next episode of Global Glory Chasers. We're really looking forward to a conversation with author Tasha June about her memoir, Tell Me the Dream Again, and why international travel is a priority for her mixed race family. So let's chase God's glory together.